Thank you. Mr. Clerk, it is 3 minutes after 7. We are in council chambers for the continuation of our budget committee, the 2018 operating budget. Council, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? There's been a couple of sheets handed out. Councillor Tom, thank you. Councillor Kim, second. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Declarations of pecuniary interest, please. Seeing none. We have no delegations, and we do open it up at this point to members of the public for input. Look forward to those who might wish to come out. Thank you, sir. If you would give us your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Ron Weiss. I live at 37 Larmont Street in Aurora. I'm the past president of Sport Aurora, and I want to thank Mayor Dahl, members of council and staff for allowing me to come forward tonight. With regard to the two organizations that I'm representing here, so it's not one, it's both of them, the Aurora Sports Hall of Fame and Sport Aurora. Both of them have operating grant requests before you for your consideration. So the Aurora Sports Hall of Fame is entering its 6th year now, after celebrating the accomplishments of 25 local sports heroes at 5 sold-out induction dinners, which is our major fundraiser of the year. In addition, we've been responsible for and instrumental in the renovation of the SARC, and frankly, I think by all accounts, people believe that that's been a very good use of our time and use of your money by helping you renovate the SARC into a premier sport tourism attraction. If it's not now, it probably will be in the future. We have a number of outreach programs, such as Sport History Alive, that visit schools each year celebrating sport, but more importantly, inspiring young people to be more active and spreading that healthy physical activity message. The Sport Hall of Fame is asking for financial support to continue our mostly volunteer work in the community. And I'll point out that in almost every bit of research that we've done about Municipal Hall of Fames, that there's been some form of funding for that Hall of Fame because of its cultural and sports significance. So we hope that you want to continue this partnership with us in preserving and sharing our rich sport history. Sport Aurora also has a grant request before you, and I want to point out that the grant request was recently revised based upon feedback that we received a number of months ago from Town Council. We reduced the budget for some aspects of the sport plan delivery, and we postponed others because we realized we have 5 years and maybe even more to deliver the sport plan. We also combined some aspects of the sport plan to be more efficient with our expenditures. We also listened to council, and it was suggested that our membership fees rise to help offset some costs. So we've doubled those fees for next year, and we'll have a proposal in front of our membership that results in a graduated fee structure that will mean larger organizations will be paying more than smaller ones, but we'll have to have that approved by them as we go forward in 2018. The net result of this is a reduction in the operating grant request from $163,000 down to $113,000. I'll also point out that this operating grant request is out of a total of $430,000 of expenses that we incur every year, which means we manage to create 69% of our operating budget. Now, since 2010, Sport Aurora has successfully brought over $1.1 million in grant money to this community. In January 2018, we'll be submitting a grant request to the OSRCF to help us fund an older adult program. That goes in on January the 19th. And although grants are not for sure, we know that we're in the right direction with that grant. We also provide expertise to the town by sitting on the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Committee. We respond when asked to provide input on matters such as the new multi-sport complex. Just 2 weeks ago, we brought our entire membership together in this room to discuss important design characteristics with some council who were present and staff. We also discussed how each organization could help with the delivery of the sport plan. We completed a large sport facility survey last year and provided this to Mr. Downey for his information. Okay. We've been instrumental in providing groundwork for the sport plan, was approved by Council in late 2015. We've completed those tasks with skill, expertise. We now have in this town the foundation of a sustainable sport program. And this year, if the operating grant is approved, you'll see our sport organizations being trained in cultural diversity. You'll see programs implemented for those with special needs in parasport. You'll see girls and women being engaged at a higher level than before, and families in financial need getting the funding that they deserve. With an aging population, you'll see programs continue to grow for adults, older adults, and seniors. We're simply going to make sport available to every citizen in this community through our outreach program, and we hope that Aurora will become a sport destination through the sport tourism strategy. Neither of our organizations requires sustainability funding. What we ask is for the council to consider what we do for our Aurora citizens, and hope that you understand that without this support, the future of some of these activities will be in jeopardy. Supporting the investment you've already made in sport is sound.
If you could wrap up, please, Mr. Weiss.
Last paragraph. Frankly, investing in any direction where you leverage your funds with committed organizations with lots of volunteers is good business. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for coming out.
Okay.
Are there any other members of the public who would wish to raise any issues? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, which is consideration of items, which is the additional budget information. Mr. Elliott, would you care to walk us through that, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just walk you through a number of items that we were asked for as we understood them. We've provided in attachment 1 a comparison of the municipal salaries and benefits as a % of total expenses. In doing that, we thought it would be useful, given our circumstances with fire, that it's a contracted service for us and not an in-house salaries and benefits. To make it more comparable across the board, we took fire out of ourselves and of the comparators that are in that sheet. We hope you find that helpful. The revised attachment 2 is a revised 5-year operating budget history. We were asked to explain something in the vehicle and fleet, and there was a change in that that's detailed in your report on page 2 of 34 of the agenda. The vehicle and fleet increased was an increase in operational supplies, but it was offset by a reduction in fuel costs. And so those two offset, and we also took a look at the bottom line of the all other expenses value and found that our 2017 number needed to be adjusted to be comparable to the 2018 number. And so we've adjusted that number. The impact there is on the salaries and benefits, and it has to do with the complexity of our reporting requirements to get these numbers for you. Attachment 3 is an updated full-time salary analysis. This is the analysis that showed some of the history of what step rates have been, what COLAs have been, and so on. And we have added in there the 2018 step value, the cost of the step rates in the 2018 budget. So that's included in attachment 3 now. Item 4, we have updated the decision, budget option decision sheet summary. Tonight we've got another change to that, so that's almost redundant or obsolete at this point. We added the Christmas market special event, and we updated the Sport Aurora material. We have replaced the Sport Aurora. They had two option requests previously. We've now given you a single sheet as attachment 5 is a single decision unit for Sport Aurora that Mr. Weiss just spoke of. And we've also attached their entire detailed submission for the revised ask. That's in attachment 6. In attachment 7, we have added a new decision option, being the Christmas market that was the subject of a council report not long ago. And so we've got a one-pager there just to get it in the material and on the list for options discussion. The Aurora Historical Society we were asked to pull together their operating budget, so we've done that. We've got some additional information for the cultural center as well. And there was one question around sponsorship money, and is there any sponsorship money available within the budget? And the answer is no. And so we believe that we've fulfilled all of the open requests that have been asked. When we do get to the options section, Mr. Mayor, I'll come back, and we have option 7, which is circulated in this material. We also have just become aware that we missed the adding in the powwow as a budget option, which was a direction of council as well. So we'll come back and talk about how we'll do options when we get to that stage. But at this point in time, perhaps if there's any questions on this additional information, I'd be happy to see if I can help.
Council, any questions for Mr. Elliott? Well, we're receiving this for information, so first of all, if I could have a motion, put this on the floor, please. Councillor Kim, Councillor Peary? Questions for Mr. Elliott with respect to this item? Councillor Marcus? Yeah, this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, I think the other week I also asked if it was possible to get a breakdown when it came to training and development as far as what is mandatory and what is extra in essence. So I was wondering if that was going to be available for us tonight.
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, pulling that together was not going to be possible within the short week. Sorry, it was a full week, but it was short to get it to agenda. I apologize, but not possible.
Okay, thank you. Oh, are we talking about specific items yet or no? No. Yeah? Okay.
Well, if you've got questions, let's go around and see if there's any questions on this item first, and then if council wants to deal with specific items, we'll go into those individually.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? Just general questions? I have one, Mr. Elliott, and I think I know the answer. And I apologize, I did not ask you earlier, but we'll get to that. Attachment 3, which is page 11 of 34. And in the second line, you've got total budgeted gross salaries, including water and buildings, full-time only. I presume that means that those people who are supported either by the water rate or by activities in the building department, which are not part of our general revenues. Is that correct? That's correct. Microphone, please.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chair. The top line was the total gross salaries, and we included those that are in the water and funded by water, also those that work in the building services division. Those two are separate from the tax budget. And so when we did the gross operational expenditures, we also estimated what the water gross operational expenditures will be as well. So we've tried to keep apples to apples in the prior years and bring it forward into 18 as best we can. And you can see that we're sitting at about 21% of our full budget is salaries and benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Any other general questions? How about specifics on any of the items that are in here? Councillor Tom? Well, if there's questions on, because a fair amount of this information, what was asked for by council at our last meeting that Mr. Elliott has provided. We're not doing the options yet. Just questions on any of this information which has been supplied. Councillor Marcus had one. If there's, Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to the Christmas market, I'm just wondering if there's, I mean, I'm seeing 29.5, and my thoughts are is that to me that's being put forward as a standalone event, and I've always maintained that I think that this is not going to be a standalone event. I can see it being combined with the Arctic Adventure, with the parade, with the tree lighting, which we're already doing within a mini market. So I don't think that is a number that would ultimately be the budget number. And so I'm wondering if for this year, moving forward, if there's some other way to provide the Christmas market, and once we deliver it and see the full potential of it, what the costs would actually be, how it would fold in with other events, and then we can come up with a more true number of what that budget number would be on a go-forward basis. I'm just wondering if staff have looked at this. I don't know who to ask, whether it's Mr. Downey or Mr. Elliott. Staff have looked at it, at those options of combining a few of the events together, because I think that if you did that, then that number wouldn't be 29.5.
Mr. Downey, can I go to you, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to the event being held with another event, if that's the direction of council, that is something that we can consider. However, we were asked to look at both options, a standalone event and a combined event. Certainly a standalone event does have some additional expenses, and I won't argue that. But the pricing that you have before you was was a standalone event. I don't want to call it the worst case scenario because it's a good event. So I was looking for an alternative word. If you wish to combine it, we will be happy to come back with a price for that. This was not only costs that were being incurred, however, by Parks and Recreation, but it was also costs that were being incurred by communications for additional marketing of a standalone event.
And that's fine, and I guess my preference would be for staff to look at combining it with some of the other events. I mean, I know that this year we're already doing a mini market with the Christmas tree lighting, so we've already combined it in essence, and I think that we're all expecting that next year, if we did go ahead with this, that the Christmas tree lighting would once again be combined with the market, and so therefore I think that it would be prudent on us to have that report come back, looking at combining it with those events and a more truer picture and truer number than a standalone event. But I don't know how everyone else feels around the table, so I'll just wait to hear some other comments, I guess.
Mr. Downey, to that point, would it be reasonable to maybe put a placeholder of $10,000 in there, say, combine that with the tree lighting event and see what you can build up to that point, and almost as a pilot year?
Through Mr. Mayor, we would prefer if council had an idea of what event they would like to combine it with, I could work towards that. As you can appreciate, if we combine it with the Santa Claus Parade, that's a weekend event. And whether the market would then go on during the day or just go on during the parade or that type of thing, we could have a discussion. The Christmas tree lighting, as you can appreciate, is a midweek event, so that creates some lesser challenges perhaps for some vendors because we aren't looking at prime vendor time. However, it also depends on location. So for instance, if we wanted to hold it in the Library Square area, a weekend is much more difficult to try to get space within the adjacent buildings of the library and the cultural center, and we're going to need to make sure we communicate that a little bit earlier. If it was being held at the Christmas tree event, now we are now looking at relocating it to Town Hall, and and those partners would no longer be available to us. So I would prefer, if you do have some ideas of exactly what event you'd like us to look at, then we could give you a little bit more of a detailed cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ideally, I think that we would combine it with the Christmas tree lighting, and I think ideally my thoughts are that the Christmas tree lighting would move to Library Square once we finalize any type of redevelopment in that area. And so I would initially just say, like, minimum, let's combine it with the tree lighting and go from there. Could it possibly down the road? I think eventually that's where we want to lead to, is down the road, that it would become a longer drawn out event that would last a couple of weeks, and you would include the parade, you'd include the Arctic Adventure. But I think initially the Christmas tree lighting is a good start to combine it with. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, what you would prefer us to do. Do you want me to make say that? I mean, I like your suggestion, if that works, to have a placeholder. I'm fine with that.
I think a placeholder would give us an opportunity to at least move forward.
I agree.
And would 10,000 give us something to work with, or do we want the full 29.5?
But do we?
We're
do
kind
we
of
need,
launching into options already, but
I agree. But do we need to, as Mr. Downey has alluded to, that we have to should tie it as a group, tie it to a specific event that we'd like to see it. So, I mean, if you need to be, I'd say that we say that it's the Christmas tree lighting that we look at tying it to for at least for next year.
I'm gonna go to the CAO. He had a potential option that we could discuss.
Sure.
No, not yet. There are some other things going on that we could perhaps tie it to.
No, and I agree. I'm just going by what Mr. Downey explained. So,
Mr. CEO? Yeah.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, there might be the opportunity with the redevelopment of the armory and that sort of thing that we could tie it to that location as well. So we need some more time for that, but and I'm not sure that it comes down to timing then in terms of a tree lighting. I'm not sure when we would be able to move a tree lighting from here to there. So there might be a 1 year where we can't quite do it, and then another year that we can. So, but if you leave it with us, then we'll try and figure out the best.
and I appreciate that. I think it's a great idea to have a placeholder that at least we can say, come back to us at a later time, and we can figure this out. But at least we have the knowledge that we're going to be having something. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry?
So I just wanted to jump into a bit of that discussion. I don't think I do think that there is a standalone component to a Christmas market. You wouldn't have it for one night only during the lighting of the Christmas tree as it currently exists at Town Park, here. I think if we're going to look at moving the Christmas tree lighting down the road somewhere else, by all means, then you can tie them all in together. But if we're going to have just the small little pop-up like we spoke about this year, here, and then next year have something that's a little bit more permanent, either at Town Park or I think ultimately it's envisioned down at Library Square. But for these types of operations to really work well, it's not a one-night only event, because to put that up in that amount of time, to take it down, I think if we're going to be approving this for 2018, we have to have an understanding that the space required is going to be more than the parking lot out here, and maybe we are looking at Town Park for this kind of price. And if that's not something that council wants to do for 2018, I think it's more important that we do it well, as opposed to putting in a placeholder of $10,000. If you want to grow this event, it's important that we give it the opportunity to grow and the opportunity to succeed. So I'm okay with the current price that we have in here. If you look at some of the other Christmas markets that are around the GTA and even further out than the GTA, they are standalone events, but there are other events that can tie into them. But ultimately, we need something that stands on its own 2 feet. And then if we want to talk later about adding in the Santa Claus Parade, adding in a tree lighting ceremony, that makes sense. But just from a timing and a doing it right perspective, I'd rather see us do this right.
Okay, Councillor, I just got to go back to the CAO for a minute.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just trying to figure out how to package this in a way. I think if council looks at this like a yellow item in the capital budget, although it's not, it's in the operating budget. But so basically, notionally giving us the agreement that you want to invest some funds in this, but you're not really ready to commit to anything else until another report comes back and irons out some of the details. So if you look at it like a yellow capital item, then I think we're on the same page.
We're all good with that? Okay. Are there any other questions with respect to just the item in terms of receiving for information? Then we can go through we'll go through the options individually. In that case, may I have vote all in favor of receiving the report for information, please? Opposed? That is carried. So then we would be going into the consideration of the options. There is a new page. Which Mr. Elliott said was almost outdated. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We need to do a couple of things here. Before we go to voting or prioritizing, we're sort of going to take this in two stages. We're going to prioritize these options, and then we're going to vote on them for inclusion or non-inclusion in the budget. Before we get to prioritization, I need to do a couple of things. One is we need to add the powwow to the bottom of your list. We missed it. You had a recent report, a recent motion from Councillor Abel to add that as a budget option for 2018. The value on that, was 20,000. So we'll be adding that 20,000 for a powwow as option number 8. There was some, we have added number 7, which we just talked about, the Christmas market. The number 6 is from the Chamber of Commerce, and there was some discussion about whether or not we wanted to vote on those as separate options or merge those together, perhaps change the total value and just say sponsorship package to be determined with the Chamber X amount. I think perhaps we have a conversation about that. Once we've had that, Jason will prepare you a voting ballot, and we'll explain that when we get to that. But we'd like to clarify where we stand with respect to the Chamber and how we'd like to proceed with that, I think, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillor, so I think the first thing I would suggest that we roll the Chamber into one item. Right now, it totals $15,000, as opposed to us deciding how, if we wish to give them some money, how best to spend it, as opposed to them deciding how best to spend it. That's obviously up to council if they'd like to roll that into one option as opposed to 4. Right now, I'm looking at page 12 of 34 in the handout that we had tonight. I'm sorry, it's 16,000. It's the home show, which was 8,500, and then 3 individual items at 2,500. Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, I mean, can we do it where the home show is separate from the other 3 and have it 2 items?
It's up to council. However council would like to handle it.
That'd be my preference, but I don't, whatever everyone wants in the majority. If they want to put it all together, put it all together. If
Councillor Kim? Okay, so do you want to put that on the?
Sure, so we have the home show as one line item, and then the other 3 combined as one.
Well, do we need, Mr. Clerk?
We don't need a, this is just discussion, right? We don't need a motion.
We'll just handle it that way.
Okay, well, if everyone's good with that, I don't know if everyone's good with
Is
that.
everyone good with that, then? Home show is one item, and then the other 3 items bundle that as one item. We're all good with that? Okay, thank you. So that would be one item at 8,500 and one at 7,500.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, so if we're into the options, then, okay, Mr. Elliott, have you got? Mr. Elliott, in terms of the ranking?
I'm sorry, I'm being asked about the Innovation Fair. If that was not in their final
Right.
set of requests, but I know that it was close to your heart.
I think anybody who went to it was close to their heart, actually.
I think perhaps that could fit within we're describing the $7,500 as Chamber of Commerce other, so it's not specified, and perhaps with that, if that is passed, then staff could work with the Chamber to find a combination of events and sponsorship returns in exchange for that $7,500.
Mr. Downey, yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that, Mr. Elliott. Mr. Downey, can you just give us a sense of what the Youth Innovation Fair cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the vast majority of, well, it was $9,000. Vast majority of that was the cash prizes that were given to each of the participants, and we had a small amount for promotion. But the large part of that was the cash prizes given to each student.
And that was Canada 150 funding in terms of?
Exactly right. That was funded out of the Canada 150. It wasn't sponsored. It was came right out of the 150 grant.
Thank you. I would certainly like, I think the Youth Innovation Fair was something that we could easily look at. I think we should look at it. I think it was Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. I was there as well, and it was amazing. But I think it's something we could get sponsored. I don't think it'd be hard to get that sponsored, so.
I don't disagree. I just, and perhaps if we want to look at it as a placeholder, it may be $5,000 based on sponsorship, kind of that yellow option that Mr. Nader Rosny talked about. Something like that.
Or it could always come out of the councillor's contingency fund if we didn't get a sponsor.
Councillor Thompson, have you got something on this item, on the Youth Innovation Fair?
Not so much youth innovation, more around sponsorship.
Okay.
If I may, first off, I apologize for being late, so I'm not sure if it was raised earlier or not, but last budget meeting I had a conversation with Ms. Mackenzie Smith about whether or not the town actually has a line item for sponsorship. So I was wondering if I could perhaps get some clarification on that, either through or to Mr. Elliott, one of the two.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in your report, we included a notation there. There is no line for undesignated sponsorship money outbound in the town's budget.
And so really it's just a comment about, I think going forward, I think it's a good thought that applying a financial figure to it and allowing staff some discretion in be able to analyze the best bang for the buck when it comes to sponsorship. So it was just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Elliott. Then how does that work with the concerts in the park? Because they're primarily all sponsored.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, the concerts in the park are sponsorships where the town is receiving funding inbound from third parties to sponsor our events. We understood the question to be, is there availability of a general budget amount of sponsorship dollars for outbound sponsorship from the town?
Thank you.
And the answer is no.
Would council then be agreeable to putting some kind of placeholder in for the Youth Innovation Fair? Say $5,000 based on additional funding or not? Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for the last, I was going to say 7 years, but, and I'm going to get back to your question, but for the last few years, you know, I feel like we've almost politicized a lot of these events. And to my knowledge, having worked for some municipalities, having spoken to other councillors and other people that I know, things like the Chamber of Commerce awards dinners, things like this event that we're talking about is a staff decision. I'm not sure that having us decide whether or not we're going to be giving sponsorships like this is the best way to be doing it. I'd rather have staff go back with a policy and be provided with a certain amount of funding for the year to look over and make these decisions. But from a branding perspective for the municipality, to not have our name on the Chamber of Commerce event because we don't want to put in 2,500. To not have our name on certain events like the Youth Innovation Fair. I'm just not sure that that's the best way for us to be making decisions. I think we're getting into the weeds. We've always been in the weeds as a council when we make these types of decisions. And I wonder if we're venturing into sort of a more administrative role, because it's completely within our role and our responsibility to set a budget and to have funds go out in a certain manner. But then it's not, I don't think, our responsibility to be dictating whether or not we're going to be giving funds to a Women's Summit, the Business Excellence Awards, or other smaller events, on a year-to-year basis. I'm not sure if that's fair to the organizations who make the request. I think that if we have a funding allocation that staff can work with, we set the parameters to that. And I think there are some grants that are different that Mr. Downey would look at, or any community services director would look at. There are some grants that economic development staff would look at. And I think that those would be two different roles and two different policies. But the way we've been doing this, the more I think about it, the more wrong I think it is. So that's my comment. I don't, Mr. Nadarozny, do you have, through you, Mr. Mayor, do you have an opinion on that? Is that the way it's worked in other municipalities where you've worked, where you'll look at $2,500 grants and sponsorships for individual events?
Mr. Nadarozny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is definitely more granular than I see in a lot of communities where the sponsorship it could be handled differently. I mean, there's variation across the board, but I see an opportunity for a comprehensive sponsorship policy that council would approve that highlights what council is trying to get out of the sponsorship and the kinds of things they're willing to sponsor and the kinds of things they're not willing to sponsor, and then leaving room in there for a reporting mechanism to come back as well, and whether that's semi-annually to report on what things have been sponsored so that council can reflect back on the decisions that are made by staff, or if the sponsorship is of a certain size that they would proactively come to council before being committed to. I've seen variations of all those kinds of things, again, depending on the dollar amount. But certainly small amounts like $2,500 for a sponsorship, I think that those kinds of commitments from the town could be easily wrapped up in a policy and left to a staff effort.
Councillor Perry?
Thanks. It's not uncommon for this council to spend 10 minutes looking at a big ticket item in our budget process, and then go turn around and spend an hour looking at a $2,500 item. I just think that there are better ways to be doing what we're doing. So those are my comments on things for right now.
And before I go back to, we're kind of getting out of here in terms of speaking order, but that's okay. One of the suggestions that we could perhaps go with is allocate a certain amount of money, $20,000 for sponsorships, which would roll into maybe the Youth Innovation Fair, certain chamber events, that type of thing, and then let staff deal with it. To Councillor Perry's spot on in terms of his point. So if we'd be interested in something like that, that might help. Because I agree, we shouldn't be determining, well, we like this event from the chamber, but not another event. That's kind of very much that's very much outside of our purview. I would agree. Councillor Gartner.
Well, I disagree. Period. I want these kind of things to come to us so that we can decide what we want to do with the taxpayers' money. I know it's a small amount of money, but I'd like to be hands-on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Gartner. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in agreement with Councillor Perry. I think we are getting too granular. I like the suggestion that you made in terms of allocating a $20,000 budget or 15 or some amount, and have staff make the decision. My only concern about that would be that there might be an item or two that we've traditionally not sponsored, and if staff decide to go ahead with that based on the lump sum that we've allocated, and we decide, let's say we, just like our in FAC, we initiated the FAC principles for our budget. We do the same for sponsorships. My only concern is that with new principles being drawn up for next year, one or two or more of the items that may be approved this time around may not be included next year. So I'm just wondering how that might work. For instance, the Chamber Home Show, I don't believe we've ever sponsored that before, and if this does get sponsored from our lump sum input this year, I just don't want that inconsistency. All of a sudden, we just sponsor for 1 year, and then next year, based on new guidelines that we set forth, it doesn't get included. So that's just my concern on that lump sum.
Thank you. Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Doss. Speaking to this item, I think if my comment would be that we don't narrow the scope to sponsorship, because it's easy to take all the the ask of the chamber and then add it all up and say, okay, well, instead we'll just tell them it's 15 and we'll give them whatever they want. I think the council will set a budget of grants and sponsorships, whatever you want to call it. You set the threshold that we think is appropriate every year, just like every other budget item, for a total. And then there's just a framework for application that happens every single year. Anyone looking for a grant, we can set the stipulations. How much is the maximum for any one grant or sponsorship? What reporting there has to be back to the town with respect to either financial reporting or otherwise. The qualifications, is it an Aurora-based group, not Aurora-based group? I mean, this is something that can be developed and managed by staff, but that is strictly run by a set of guidelines that council can approve. And that way, as Councillor Gartner mentioned, if we get reporting on the structure, then we are still hands-on. It just means we're not discussing it now. And it also means that we're not just, we set the budget and members and groups and members of the public apply, not the other way around, and then we decide our number based on that. I think that just helps us plan. Okay, this year it's 50,000 for grants and sponsorship, or maybe it's 100, maybe it's 20, and then people can apply. That's the most fair way. I think other municipalities do it that way, and so that would be my preference, because then you get away from these kinds of discussions. And I don't know how we kind of got onto this topic, because I thought we were talking about the options, but everyone had a swipe at this, so that would be my preference for next year's budget. Take all these off our table. We set what number we think is right and the parameters around it, and let staff go from there.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, and we do have something now where a group can apply for $1,000, depending upon whether they fit specific criteria. Do we still have the Arts and Culture grant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is the Arts and Culture Grant was amalgamated with the Community Grant Program. So the funds that are allocated through the Community Grant Program also include Arts and Culture.
So then would we want to roll it into that? I mean, we're already giving, what is, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Elliott, do you know the amount of money we've allocated? We never spend it all.
It's in the $14,000 to $16,000 range. We'll get that number for you.
That's what we spend or what we are allowed to spend?
That's what we allocate in the budget for community grants, including the arts and culture.
Thank you. And this, I mean, this may just fit into that kind of criteria.
Okay, Council, thank you. I think probably our best thing right now, go back to the options, and we'll just start at option one, which happens to be Sport Aurora. So let's just deal with Sport Aurora at this point, in terms of that option, have that discussion and work our way through the list, although we've already discussed. I'm sorry, Cal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to make sure that we all understand the process. So we're going to discuss each item in the option, and then at the end, we're going to get a sheet, and we're going to evaluate them and number them accordingly, and then we're going to have the cutoff line like we did last year. Is that what we're doing?
Yep, Mr. Nader-Rusby, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the intent is, so the draft budget option decision summary would be the starting point. We go through each of the options. Council may modify those options, split them, add to them, have an A and a B, whatever they want to do to the options. When that whole chart has been reviewed, and if there's any other options that council wants to put on the table, with the agreement of council, we would add those to the ballot, to the score sheet, whatever you want to call it. And then we would go back, produce a brand new sheet for council to consider, and they'd be able to weight all of those individually from 0 to 10, 0 being they have absolutely no interest in funding that option, 10 being that they're completely in favor of it, and of course the range in between. When we add up all the scores for any one option, we would figure out where the halfway point is, and anything that had less points than the halfway point wouldn't even get considered because there wasn't even enough points to consider it. Those things above that number, now council has to decide, is that the order that they want to fund them? Is that where they want to draw the line, or is that still too much money and something else has to? So there'd be another discussion after all of the options have been ranked.
Thank you, and that was my understanding. I just wanted to make sure that was what we were doing, so thank you.
Mr. Elliott?
If I may, we're just going to share with you, call it the updated list. We've made a few amendments to this options list, so Jason's just going to project what the options list has on it at this point.
Thank you.
We have taken the Chamber of Commerce. It's now on 2 lines, 8,500 and 7,500. We've added the powwow. We've added the Youth Innovation Fair. And I remind you also, we circulated at the beginning of the meeting, number 7 is a new projector and blinds for the AFLC for $5,000. So that's what's on the list, and we could go to print ballots. If this is what you want to vote on, then we could print the ballots. If it's not, then let's make adjustments, and then we can print the voting sheet.
Thanks, Mr. Elliott. And I will point out that at this point, which is in the package, but there's about $115,000 in terms of that headroom that we have for considering options, unless council wishes to look at alternative sources of funding like the council contingency fund. So if we could have comments on Sport Aurora, questions on Sport Aurora? Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Dawes. So this item was revised from the original ask. The original ask goes back to the, I believe there's a May meeting of the budget consultation process, and 2 asks were included. One for $94,765, and another one that was for sustainability, and the next one for $68,505. The old budget sheets for both items as a standalone are still in our budget binder, and on focusing on the one for the sport plan, it talks about recommending the town enter a service contract with Sport Aurora for 2018 to continue fulfilling town's vision outlined in the sport plan. I would imagine that would be, since this is 2018, would be year 3 of the sport plan, because the town funded year 1 of the sport plan in 2016. Year 2 was funded this past summer. I think it was in July. And so this would be year 3. So my question is, now Sport Aurora have come to us with a revised budget, but in their own budget documents that they provided to us in the attachment, they don't include what the cost would be to implement for year 3 of the sport plan. So I'm going to ask 2 questions of staff. One is, how are we going to draw up a service agreement if we don't know how much we're spending on the sport plan? And I guess the more important question is, how much are we spending on the sport plan? Because the way the new revised number looks is that we're spending 113,400. If you remember, I think the year one, our first year implementation, we budgeted $100,000 and we spent 50. And then last year we spent 60. And now, so I don't know if staff have the answers to these questions.
I'll go to Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I asked exactly the same question. The response that I received from Sport Aurora was they believe both their sustainability request and the sports plan were linked together. In that if the council was not able to provide sustainable funding for Sport Aurora, they weren't capable of doing the sports plan. So they felt that both items needed to be combined and that one couldn't be separated from another. In that providing funding for a sports plan without sustainable funding for Sport Aurora, they wouldn't have the capabilities of doing that. Conversely, if you only looked at sustainability, part of their program involves elements of the sport plan. So they felt that they needed to combine both together and present as one number, and that's why you see $113,000.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. And my question is either to Mr. Downey or to Mr. Nader-Rosny. What would, based on your experience, what would it cost for us to implement year 3 of the sport plan? Would it cost less than 113 grand if we went with another contractor or some other organization? What would it cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you recall in the sports plan, there was a sports development officer that was identified within the sports plan. So we would be engaging that sports development officer. If there was work that was required outside of that, we would then put together an RFP and call a contract for that. So I am not able to give you an exact number. I can just give you a process that's been identified within the sports plan of how to execute the recommendations identified in the plan. We decided to go the route where we felt that Sport Aurora would be able to fulfill our needs in order to address the recommendations of the sports plan without hiring a sports development officer. So that would be our first step in moving forward with the sports plan.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I just have a challenge with this item because, you know, it's one thing to implement, you know, to contract a community group, and I think they've done a good job so far in implementing the sports plan. The first year, if I recall correctly, the rationale was the Trillium funding had lapsed. Their ask was, I think it was $56,000, which was basically almost bridging the gap between Trillium and moving forward. And then in year 2, they asked for $94,000, which we approved contingently on getting a report back after year 1. And the report we got in the summer was that they'd be spending $61,000 on the sport plan and $32,000 for sustainability. And then in their original ask this year, that number moved up to $68,000. So we knew what it was costing. But in the presentation tonight, we've just heard that some of the items from the sport plan will be pushed back a couple of years, you know, and I'm not comfortable combining both. I mean, if the vendor and Sport Aurora is unable to deliver the sport plan that we're willing to pay for year 3 implementation, because if the other funding doesn't come about, then that's a serious conversation we need to have. But to me, you need to, if we're going to spend taxpayer dollars on implementing a sport plan, we need to have it separated out. We need to have a separate service agreement so that we know what we're paying for and what we're getting back in return. And I think that's a fair comment, at least in my opinion. I'll wait to see what other councils have to say about it, but I'm not comfortable moving forward on option 1 unless it's separated out.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to Councillor Tom's point, you know, I'm in agreement that you know, you separate out those 2 items. What's the sustainability and what is for the sport plan? Philosophically, I'm in total agreement with that. I do understand and I do appreciate the contributions that Sport Aurora make to our community each and every year. And there's value, and how to put value on that, given, we talk about KPIs, and they've given us some KPIs, and is more warranted, or are there other ways that we can make a decision? It's, I struggle with that, but I do know that I do want to have Sport Aurora as a long-term partner, but what that structure looks like, I'm still uncertain. And with that, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nadarasny, last year we had the Cultural Partners task or project, and I'm just wondering where you are with that, and when do you think you can get that completed? Because part of that motion or project was so that we can identify, who the cultural partners are and what the funding model looks like, and that would include Sport Aurora. And I know we've had a stage one, phase, completed in terms of identifying, but there's still a great, 70-80% of it that's still undone, and that would have really helped in terms of discerning what our funding model for Sport Aurora would look like. And so can you just give us an idea whether that's still on the radar for the next few months or so?
Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is, although in the first stage of the report that we brought to Council, identifying cultural partners, we suggested that while there's a cultural element to sport, that for the next step forward, we weren't considering Sport Aurora because of this very issue in terms of sustainability in the sport plan, and we didn't want to muddy the two. And so the work going forward is involving the other sort of more traditional cultural groups, and the next step for them is to get them all together in a facilitated session to talk about the mandates of each of those groups, where they overlap, where they're complementary to each other, and so on, and using that as a basis for a discussion about how to move forward for the funding model for culture in the town. So as proposed at this stage, that work would begin in the new year, but it wouldn't right now include this kind of funding, because this was seen as something that was coming separate from Sport Aurora.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I know that that information wouldn't be ready, obviously, for tonight's decision. I'm ready to move forward with the funding for Sport Aurora, knowing that I'm hopeful that in the next 12 months before the next budget, or for next council, that there be specific parameters around who the cultural partners would be. And I think in light of discussing this now, I think maybe Sport Aurora, and we got Music Aurora, there's all these other partners, I think, that need to be included in the conversation. But for now, I'm fine with moving forward with the funding amount, but if you separate that, that would make it more clear. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, you've worked with Sport Aurora for a few years, specifically with the sports plan, and as far as I know, each year there's been clear objectives. Have they met those to your satisfaction?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, actually we've been setting up, since we engaged them in the second, for the second term, I've been meeting with them on a regular basis, and they've been providing recommendations and moving forward on those recommendations, meeting with committees, researching best practices in other municipalities. I've been quite satisfied with the work they've done so far.
And if council moves forward with approving the amount before us, is it clear to you what the objectives are with regards to the sports plan and what they hope to accomplish in 2018?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't sat down and discussed that, in that they aren't a funded partner at this point, so I haven't spent a lot of time with them discussing what's next. I've spent most of my time dealing with what they needed to accomplish in this second phase. So we haven't developed a work plan and what areas we felt are priority in order to deal with in year 3.
So will that be a necessary step going forward before funds are released?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. If you recall, when we moved forward, I thought there was a squirrel in the room or something. Anyway, if you recall, when we moved forward with the second part of the plan, we had a scope of work identified, and that scope of work was then included in the agreement that was vetted through our solicitor and signed by the town and Sport Aurora. We know what work needs to be done in Phase 3 or Part 3 of this project. I just haven't sat down and discussed it with them in terms of when that would happen and what timelines would be associated with those. So I didn't get specific with them.
Thank you. And, you know, we've had lots of comments around the table, both tonight and other nights, with regards to community groups. And I agree that, you know, we need to develop a better framework upon which both the mechanism for them applying for funding, as well as reporting mechanisms and ensuring that those objectives are being met. And, you know, but I see groups like Sport Aurora and other ones as an investment in our community. And so, you know, I think that you look at the initiatives that they do, and I think we should look beyond the group itself, but look at the initiatives and what they're accomplishing. And then ask yourself whether or not they're providing value to the community. And I think they are. You look at all the different events and all the things they're delivering on, and I think there's tremendous value to the community. And if you use a comparison, well, you could say that, you know, let's take this all in-house, and as Mr. Downey said, let's hire a sport development officer, which at the time when we were debating it was anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 just for wage costs alone. And you throw in all of these other events, and I think you would find that it would be significantly more than the amount before us. Yes, there'd be a greater degree of accountability because it would be in-house, but I think we can work with Sport Aurora and develop that to the comfort level of all of council. You know, further to that, I mean, you just look at there's 2 events on the docket here before us, and both of them are listed between $20,000 and $30,000 per event. When you look at all the events that Sport Aurora has been able to accomplish, and again, I think it reinforces the fact that we're getting good value for our dollar. So, you know, I'm supportive of the work they've done. I see it as an investment in the community. However, I acknowledge that we need to work on having a proper framework and a more formalized agreement with them.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Thank you very much. I don't want to repeat. Councillor Thompson actually said many of the items that I was going to say as well. I mean, when you look at the list of items and in the many ways that Sport Aurora give back, it's extremely substantial. And I'm just looking at their expense versus revenue and net requested. I mean, the give back is unbelievable. And I think I think the value here is one that I see. It's evident every day. We are a sport town, and they absolutely put us on the map for that. And I think it helps our Parks and Recreation Cultural Department very, very, very much to have this extensive relationship. I think the ask is, you know, when I look at overall and what they give back in our overall budget, for me, it's the value is there. So I'm in support. I don't want to see any changes from us. I'm going to support both areas. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. I'm going to go to Councillor Peary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is one thing in this report that I'm looking at, and it does kind of bug me a little bit. I just think it should be noted that if you exclude Activate Aurora, which is only running for a limited period of time, we're in fact funding 72% of their operations. So it is listed as us only contributing to 31%, but in fact it's much higher than that when you look at what they're doing on a year-to-year basis. To Councillor Tom's point, I think if you're going to look at certain items to cut, there's really only 1 or 2 things from this list that's presented in front of us where you can look. For me, anyways, it's the promotion of sport and sport tourism. Those are the 2 issues that, if I was going to be looking at reducing the budget, that's where it would come from. I think from an administration standpoint, they do a great job with their staff member. I do agree that, again, although they're doubling how much money they're asking for each organization, going from $25 to $50 for an organization like Aurora Minor Hockey, is a very small amount. It's something they're working on. I'm happy to hear that it's something they're working on, but you know, $1 per participant in any sport isn't a lot to ask, or even $2 per participant for every sport with a minimum of $50. Again, that would see their revenues increase a big way. But to Councillor Thompson's point, to Councillor Humphreys' point, I do think we're getting a fairly good value for what we pay.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Anyone else for the first time? I think we've got everyone. Just before I go to Councillor Tom, Mr. Downey, I think one of the concerns of council is the amount, because we're also looking at the Sports Hall of Fame as well, in terms of the sporting world. The promotion of sport and sport tourism is, do you have a good sense on how that's working, on what value that's bringing back? Is that something that could be handled perhaps internally by our staff, or is that something that perhaps you could come back early next year with, here's what this is, here's what it's doing for us? Put a little bit of intrinsic value to it?
With regards to promotion of sport and sport tourism, they are two major factors within not only what Sport Aurora does, but also what we're trying to accomplish within the sports plan. It was interesting during the conversation that I was having in this chamber a couple of weeks ago with at the AGM for Sport Aurora. A lot of the talk about the new sports center that we're looking at, or multi-purpose sports center we're looking at, was trying to develop facilities that would assist us in sport tourism and promotion of sport within the community. A lot of groups are interested in the town getting more involved in that. I can tell you the committee that I've been meeting with through Sport Aurora on the sports plan have been working very hard in identifying partners, looking at best practices, developing strategies in order to bring sport and promote sport tourism within Aurora. There are some major challenges with that right now that we hope are going to be addressed in the near future, such as getting a hotel in town, making sure that we have sufficient facilities, meeting with each group to ensure that they feel promotion of sport is a priority, and giving up some of their time in order to permit tournaments or swim meets or whatever to happen in Aurora, and also put Aurora on the map with regards to publicity and promoting, that's the word I was looking for, promoting Aurora and Aurora amenities to bring sports into this community. And so we're developing strategies with regards to that. So I think we're setting the table quite well, and as those elements start coming to fruition, when we start bringing the hotel in, when we do have better facilities, I think the work that they're doing right now will really help us move forward much quicker than if we're starting from a standing start after we got those facilities. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I really like the direction that we're going, and we're thinking down the road in anticipation of many of these elements being built in Aurora.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Appreciate the answer. Go to Councillor Gartner for a first time on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I was going to say pretty much what Mr. Downey just said. When we didn't have any prospect of having a hotel, I was wondering about sports tourism, but we're going to have a hotel, and maybe more than one. And I was at part of that AGM, and I think what Mr. Downey said about them setting the stage is going to put us in a good position, because everybody wants sports tourism.
Thank you, Councillor Gartner. Councillor Tom, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. So just a quick answer from staff then. Are we not going to have a service contract?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, absolutely we are.
We absolutely are?
We are going to have a service contract?
Are we going to have a service contract?
Yes, we have one now.
So we're going to continue that to the tune of $113,400?
No, we have a service contract right now for the work that they're doing on the sports plan. So we've entered into a service contract. It expires on December 31st.
I understand that, but there's obviously a number tied to that.
Yes, a budget number, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
but not a number from the 2018 budget.
I appreciate that. So well, that's what I'm asking. You're asking to allocate $113,000. I'm asking how much of that's going to be covered in the service contract. My question is,
Oh.
what are we, I don't know what we're going to spend to implement year 2 of the sports plan. If the answer is $113,000, then that's the answer. I'd just like an answer on what we're spending to implement year 3 of the sport plan.
And I can't give you that number.
That's a problem, I think. I mean, if it's going to be $68,505, at least we know it's $68,505. We know what we're spending. We know what we're getting. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to impugn what Sport Aurora does. I think they do great work in the community. I just think we should know what we're paying for if we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So I don't agree that it should be combined. You know, I just think we should have an accounting for, and if we're going to have a contract, then we know exactly what we're paying for. So that's a comment. I agree with other members of council about the work that Sport Aurora does. They do a lot of good work. The Breakfast of Champions, the volunteer recognition, women in coaching, Sport for Life, you know, the Activated Aurora program, which they got a Trillium grant for, has been great. I would agree with Councillor Peary that once that expires, then we do move to, you know, funding over 70% of the operations. But then again, maybe in 2 years, that'll change. But I just want to just make another comment, which is that in the previous iteration, so before it was revised, we were talking about Sport Aurora sustainability. And you know, call it whatever, sustainability operating grant. The only comment I would make is that a lot of members of council have talked about how the events that they run would be, you know, they're great and there's good value for money and all the rest of it. And I totally agree. I think they are great. But if you look at the first projected 3-year budget that we got in 2015 from Sport Aurora, Breakfast of Champions was expenses only had a projected expense of $9,000. If you look at their budget for this year, their Breakfast of Champions has only gone up by around $1,500. So clearly the increase in spending, it has nothing to do with increasing the spending on those events because they're very similar. Sport volunteer recognition for this year that they're asking for is $4,850, and from the 2015 3-year projection, it's around the same. It's actually less. They projected $6,900 back then. Now, if you look at all of the budgets they presented since 2015, these numbers are relatively similar for all the events that they're going to be running. Where the big increase in costs has come, as in the administration costs, so staffing, and promotion of sport, which is essentially, and sport tourism, which is essentially marketing budget. So the comment I'll make is that, you know, we're discussing budget options, and it was originally kind of billed to us as sustainability, but the budget has obviously increased, and from around $36,000 projected 2018 administration cost that was back in 2015 to now it's around $65,000. So that's where the growth to me is coming from. I don't know if you'd call that sustainability, you call it growth. You're not sustaining what they had, they're asking for more. Again, I'm not saying that they don't do good work in the community. I think the real shame of this exercise we're going through now is that we have to, at least I don't feel comfortable just throwing, or spending $113,000 without a service contract. And, I wish it had at least come to us the way it was originally billed, with them separated out. The budget for this group has increased over the last 3 years. That's great. I think they're doing well. They've gotten new grants and all the rest of it. But, in my opinion, I'd be comfortable moving forward as a contract basis for the sport plan. I was the only one in the summer who had an issue with moving forward with operating funding on a regular basis because I don't think it's the proper role for this council. That's my opinion. And unfortunately, I'm in the same position now, although I'm in the more unenviable position of not being able to vote for this year 3 of the sport plan because it's all or nothing. I'm not comfortable moving forward with option 1 unless we get an idea of what the cost is to implement year 3, and that's reflected in the service agreement or contract that we'll be filling out with Sport Aurora. So I'm not in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Perry mentioned Activate Aurora, and it just made me think of something that I just wanted to add. I mean, I just, you know, going back to an investment, you know, this organization prior to Activate Aurora also had a Trillium grant for, I think it was 200,000. So if you look at it, you know, there's nearly $500,000 in funds that they've been able to secure through grants and programs that, you know, quite frankly, is pretty amazing. I mean, you look at the grants that the town has gotten. We've gotten some 20,000 grants and $15,000 grants, and they've been very successful in doing it. And while I wouldn't have the figures, I'd hazard a guess that the majority of that money is being spent in our community or in and around our community. So they're investing those dollars back into it. So, you know, we have an economic development program called our community or CIP plan, where money's being set aside and given in businesses because we believe investing in those businesses and their facades and so forth benefits the town, and there's a return on that investment. Again, the organization, you know, not just through the activities they're doing, but their ability to raise funds from other programs and grants and be invested back in the community seems also to be worthwhile of continuing this relationship, because there is a return to our community.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm completely fine with the number. I mean, I'm working out in my head in terms of, you know, the previous numbers that were presented to us by Sport Aurora, and the sport plan. You know, looking at the breakout of, you know, promotion of sport tourism. I'm sure, you know, that they're built into these line items, and you know, what I'm proposing is we put this as a yellow item. We conditionally approve, and can we have Sport Aurora just come back by next GC or the next council with just a breakout of what the Sport Aurora or the sport plan composes of this whole amount, and we just notionally approve on the aggregate item of $113,000. Is that possible through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nadrasny, given the timetable?
Mr. Nadrasny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can attempt to do that. The part that's easy is the sort of, as we've referred to it already, the yellow categorization of the contribution. It might be a little tricky to come back in before the finalization of the budget on December 12th and have that, you know, yellow change to an unrestricted. Just because I'm not sure what it will take to come up with an agreement with Sport Aurora in terms of the sport plan delivery component of it. But the rest of it is absolutely doable, just as we've done with, just as being suggested with the Christmas market and the innovation fair right now.
Well, I'm fine with, I'm not sure if it's an amendment, but put an amendment to have a conditional approval of the aggregate amount of $113,000 and condition of Sport Aurora coming back to us by the next cycle with a breakout for the sports plan.
Just before I go to that, I've got two other speakers I'd like to use,
sure.
then I'll come back to you, if I may. Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be long. I just want to say that I agree with a lot of sentiments around the table. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys. You know, I think there is a great value in what Sport Aurora provides to our community. Do I think that they could work on a few things as far as what they charge for their user fees? 100%. But I think that they're working on that, and they'll develop that, and I think that's a good thing. But I do look at this as far as they promote sport within our town. They promote our residents, and we have a lot of high-end talent that does not get promoted, but they do a very excellent job in promoting that talent. And I think that value and investment and return comes back to this town by once that promotion gets out there and the word gets out there that Aurora does have this high talent. You'll see a lot of bigger tournaments coming. I think it does set the stage, and I think they're doing an excellent job of setting the stage to help with the tourism aspect. So I see a great deal of value with it, and I have no issues with agreeing with this and green lighting this in essence and going forward with the funding.
Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to know what things are going to be delayed in the sports plan and what the future plans are for charging more to the member organizations. Because, I mean, money is always tight for us, and I don't see it, and it's going to continue to be tight. And I don't know if we'll always be able to afford to put the amount of funding that we've put in the past going forward. So whatever the organization can do to be more self-sustaining would certainly be appreciated. I mean, I actually agree with a lot of the things that have been said around the table, including some of Councillor Tom's comments. We just need more clarity, and I'd like to see that, because nobody is saying that Sport Aurora isn't providing value. But I think we need some more clarity on it. And I'm glad to give it a yellow and come back with more information, including what we're going to be delaying.
Thank you, Councillor Gartner. Mr. Weiss, did indicate that he was going to go to the AGM, which I think is in January, with the concept of looking at scaled fees. So I think that's a good sign. Obviously, that's up to their organization to implement or not, as they choose. And I think actually they've garnered closer to $1 million in grants looking at it from that perspective, it's a pretty good investment in the town. So I would certainly support, if Councillor Kim wishes to move that as conditional based on getting some additional information back, if someone would care to second that. Doesn't look like it. Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know we've already yellow lit, I guess, and made them conditional. I'm just wondering, moving forward, how does that affect our overall tax rate? Like, when we say that we're going to make it conditional upon receiving this information, well, in essence, what's that doing?
Mr. Nader Rosny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding of what you're doing is you're putting the money in the budget, and so the levy is impacted, and we're just not advancing anything until some other steps are taken. So it's not, the money's in the budget, but the actual expenditure has not been approved yet.
So thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So if I'm correct, that means in essence we've already conditionally approved $34,500.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the way this is intended to work is that if council ranks it gives it a ranking, and if it meets the number, then it would only be conditionally approved. If there wasn't enough points for it, it would, even though it's yellow now, it would drop off the list.
And thank you. And that's kind of, I guess, where, through you, Mr. Chair, what my question was, is that have we already taken this off the list of whether we're going to be ranking it or not, or are we still ranking the ones that we put a yellow to? Okay, then I just want to make sure that we're all clear about what we're doing before we get to that point. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. No further comments or questions. All in favor? Oh, Councillor. Well, it's not really an amendment. Well, you've already spoken twice. Are you referring to Mr. Durand, our clerk? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I would like to get some clarity to this amendment about them reporting back, because in item 1 that we received tonight, there was an executive summary which broke down each one of the initiatives that they have and said their net request that makes up that $113,400. So it clearly identified where the money's being allocated to, be it promotion of sport, tourism, administration, and so forth. And so it's not rocket science to say which part's the sports plan and which part is the organization. Sure, it's not down to the penny, but you know, how is the organization expected to allocate the administration versus the running of Sport Aurora versus the sport plan? Is the expectation then that they're going to break down from a cost accounting perspective what percentage of the person's time is allocated to this initiative and that initiative. Perhaps since the amendment's on the floor, we can get some clarity on that. Because there is an additional 6 pages for each one of the initiatives talking about how they're going to do it, what the net request is. So if this information is not sufficient, what exactly are we asking for in a future report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I thought that what the premise that suggestion was put forward was on the basis of some form of separation of the amounts for the sport plan versus the other activities. So, as Mr. Downey said, we haven't had those detailed discussions, that if we were signing an agreement with Sport Aurora right now, Mr. Downey was not sure of what a number would be allocated towards the sport plan, the balance then being an operating grant. So if council wants clarity on that split, then that's my understanding of why it would be a yellow item. If council isn't interested in that balance, then you're right, there's detailed information before you now.
Again, I go back to the chart before us where Mr. Downey said earlier that the promotion of the sport and sport tourism, are 2 of the central pillars of the sports plan. And so that net request makes up $58,000 of the $113 before us. And then there's another $59,000 associated with administration. So how are we going to ask Sport Aurora to break down the administration of their organization between those 2 points? Are we going to ask them from a cost accounting perspective to look at all their personnel and identify what percentage of time they do it? Because we don't do it for our own stuff, so I want to know what we're asking of the organization. To me, the information before us is sufficient, so I won't vote for the amendment.
Fair enough. Councillor Tom?
The town, thank you, the town is contracting for a service. And in all other cases, when you contract for a service, you have an understanding of how much will be spent, what work will be done, and what time frame that'll be done in. Councillor Thompson points to the attachments 6. They do break down their administration expenses. They break down their promotion of sport, their sport tourism expenses. Yeah, but those were broken down to us when they first came to council in 2015, in their first 3-year projection to the town. There's been increases, but their first 3-year projected budget in 2015, projecting the years 2016, 17, and 18, had a total for administration of 30, 33, and 36 for over those 3 years. Sport tourism and communications was around 30 for sport tourism across those 3 years, and 16, 9, and 9 for years for communications for 2016, 17, and 18. So clearly they obviously had, all I think we need to ask for is what it'll cost. It'll take a year, okay, great. And exactly what we get out of it. I'm not in favor of the amendment either, by the way, but I'm just saying, the executive summary that was provided gives a good indication of what they're asking for. I don't disagree with you, but I think it should be, the very least, if we're going to spend what was originally a $68,000 ask for a year 2 implementation of a sport plan, that we have a clear indication of, again, the cost, what we get from it, and obviously how long it's going to take. I get it that, it might be spelled out if you, read between the lines and say, okay, well, their promotion of sport budget is really the sport plan. Then why wouldn't that be line itemed out? Again, they're providing a service. Lots of companies provide services. They would never provide a service to a client without a contract, without a cost of what the cost is going to be and when am I going to deliver on that. It's not for council to go sifting around through executive summaries to try and put it together themselves. I don't think it's too much to ask for them to separate it out and present it to us. Council may disagree with me, but that's my opinion. So I'm not in favor of the amendment either, but I got afforded another opportunity to speak, so I did.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm not in support of the amendment either. I just seconded just for conversation, but through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, there will be a service contract signed. Will there not be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there will be.
Okay, so I appreciate it. So I agree that, there's more than enough information. I think it's broken down in I think in detail. At the end of the day, we'll get that number. This whole number of 113 includes, the work that's going to be done for the sport plan. That number we'll get once the contract's signed. I think Mr. Downey can just come back to us and just kind of give us a number and say, well, out of that 113, this is what the contract was signed for, and these are, once that contract's signed, it's going to be more descriptive with the deliverables and which aspects of year 3 within the sport plan are going to be the ones that we're going to be looking to achieve. But I mean, as far as all the other, quite frankly, I look at some of the other things that we received from some of the other user groups that have come before council asking for money, and I think that this is a much more detailed analysis of their figures compared to some of the other stuff that we've received that in essence show three lines. I mean, I don't want to specifically knock anyone that's come before us, but I mean, some of those presentations we received had 3 lines on it and said this, we have expense, revenues, overall. This is the money we need. This, as Councillor Thompson's mentioned, is geez, it's almost 20 pages here of detail. So I'm quite fine and moving forward. Doesn't need to, as I said before, it doesn't need to be conditional on my part, but if that's the way to get the majority to move forward, then so yeah.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Downey. In other, when we do not go out for tender on a particular service, one of the reasons why we can not go out to retender is because there's familiarity, there could be added costs of transitioning to another service provider. Is that correct, Mr. Downey?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would go to another provider mostly because we weren't satisfied with their performance, not because it was difficult or whatever. So this service provider, in our opinion, has provided good service to the town, and so we're recommending that we continue on with them. But if we didn't, my recommendation would be go to an RFP and see if we can't get another contractor out there.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm not hinting that we go out to another contractor. My point is that I do recall in a couple of circumstances where we sole sourced or we just established a contract with a service provider because of familiarity. They provide a unique service and so forth, and which is the services that Sport Aurora provides for us. There's familiarity, there's a confidence level that we have with an existing partner, and frankly, I vote down my own amendment. The only reason why I put it up was out of respect for Councillor Tom, because I do understand where he's coming from, and certainly there are several pages of detail. But what I was, I thought what Councillor Tom wanted was just how much X amount of the sport tourism budget or that line item is going to the plan and so forth. That's all I was asking. Personally, I'm fine with the 113,000. I'm fine with voting down my own amendment, and we can certainly vote for it. If Councillor Tom is not going to support the amendment, then there's no reason why I should support it myself, because it's just out of respect for Councillor Tom's view, which I respect, and yeah, I'm fine with that as well. But given our partner, which we've had for several years, and the work that they've done, I'm fine with voting down the amendment and go back to the main motion. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. And maybe the best solution here is the simplest solution. We provide the Historical Society $80,000 to provide heritage services. We provide the Cultural Center $400,000 to provide arts and cultural services. We provide the library $4 million to provide library services. Maybe we just provide, get Mr. Downey to broaden the definition in the agreement with Sport Aurora, and we can give him $113,400 to provide sports services, which includes the sports plan.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. I was listening to the conversation around the table. That's exactly what I think we should do. So there's no misunderstanding. Sport Aurora can plan, just like our other community groups, and they provide an outstanding service. I mean, when the motion first came forward, and I appreciate where Councillor Kim was coming from, But the documentation in support of what they're doing with each of those buckets of funds is very clear. I'm fine with the explanation and don't need anything further, so
Okay,
I will
folks,
not be supported. I just want to say that, thank you.
there is actually no amendment on the floor because
I
there
thought
was
there
no
was.
motion to amend.
Oh.
So we've all spoken about 4 times on this, so
Okay, let's vote.
I'm gonna call the vote
Call the
on,
question.
well, the Councillor Kim's motion was to give this a yellow conditional approval. All in favor?
Point of order.
Sir?
You allowed to speak twice on the amendment. My name comes up for a second time, and now it's time to call
I
the vote.
believe you already spoke twice on the amendment.
Incorrect.
Quickly, please.
The only comment I'm going to make, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the time to speak. First year, we paid $56,000 for implementing year 1 of the sport plan. Last year, we spent $61,000 for implementing year 2 of the sports plan. We have no idea, not one person has said what it will cost, other than $113,000 to implement year 3.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. All in favor of the motion on the floor, which is to give it conditional approval? Opposed? That fails. Councillor Thompson? Thank you. Second? Motion? Be approved? We're not voting on individual. We're just. You're going to rank them all when you're finished. We're going to rank it. We're just talking about it, okay? So we're going. So there's not going. There's no motions. We're just talking about it. No. We're going to move to item 2. No, we've already done item 2. Correct? Councillor Moore.
A question about the new sheet that we got this evening? This is about requiring an additional projector, an audiovisual.
Sorry?
The sheet that was at the table when we came tonight.
Well, that's number 7.
Okay, so we're not at number 7 yet.
No.
Okay. Where are we then?
Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bid everybody adieu. I've got to be up tomorrow morning to be at the airport for 4:30, so I have to head out at this point. My only request, once we've finalized the list around the council table, if willing to the remainder of everyone around here, I'd like the opportunity to rank. I think Councillor Abel would appreciate the opportunity to rank these items as well. So if we can push the ranking off towards another night and use the remainder of this night to finalize the list of what we're ranking, that would be my request, but I'll leave that in your hands and have a good night.
I'm not sure how that would work, but we'd have to have another meeting. The only way we can do that.
Well, let's rank now.
Well, we haven't finished the discussion. Okay, no, we're going to move on to we'll never get out of here tonight. And I'm pretty sure that some of our staff would like to get out of here this evening, as opposed to stay here till whenever. Sports Hall of Fame sustainability. Okay, speakers, you get to speak twice, then we'll have a motion. Or no, then we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. We'll get this organized yet. Councillor Humphreys.
On Sport Hall of Fame sustainability, I absolutely support it. We need to continue to grow it, and I'll be behind it. That's
Thank
it.
you. Perfect. Appreciate that. Councillor Kim.
Give them the money.
I'm sorry?
Give them the money. I support it. Thank you. I'm not going to talk again.
Councillor Thompson.
I don't know if Mr. Downey or yourself can sort of answer this question, but what I would be interested with regards to the Sports Hall of Fame is their long-term plans, because I do notice that Shauna White, our curator, has done some, I don't want to say significant, but done some work with them with regards to the display of artifacts and so forth. And so you know, long-term, you know, has there been any discussion whether or not they will stay as an independent body, or, you know, will that relationship with the town continue to be come closer and closer? And is that even something that Mr. Downey perhaps in the future has thought about maybe best suited under the town's umbrella? I'm not sure, but I'm just would like to know whether or not they've had those kind of, you know, 10-year, 15-year long-term plans.
Mr. Downey, you got any input on that?
Certainly. Yes, there's been some discussion, but no, there's been no definite plans. They do wish to stay a arm's length body from the town. So they believe they have a greater fundraising capability in doing that, and I concur. The question is, what components of their plan do we feel that deserve a sustainability function for council, and what parts of their plans are something that if they wish to expand that particular program, then they need to go off and do some fundraising. So if they wanted to get into a particular event, there may be, and it might cost $5,000, the town may be through sustainable funding willing to put in $1,000 from their operating grant, but then they would have to go off and find an additional $4,000 through sponsorship in order to make that happen. So that's the kind of model they're looking at right now. Certainly they are fairly aggressive in the marketing portion of that right now, looking at setting up reserve funds, looking at different ways of generating funds for the hall. There's also talk about, you know, what's the future of the hall going to look like? Is the future of the hall at the SARC, or is it another facility? And should we be looking at making a pitch to have it at the facility that we're looking at Library Square, or is there a pitch that we should be looking at it at the new multi-purpose recreation facility, or those types of things? So the actual physical look of the hall, or whether or not a hall, there's a central location for the hall, and we have aspects of the hall spread out throughout the town through some of our funding partners. So there's several models that they're looking at right now that move towards as much of a sustainable model as possible. Certainly when they were looking at coming forward for this request, one of the items they have in it is a sustainable number of 40.7%. They feel what they need to do is work towards getting that number as low as possible. So each year that number comes down so that there is less of a percentage of a request from council. Now, there may be, that may limit their ability to expand, and that is only limited by the Sports Hall of Fame's ability to fundraise or bring on sponsorship. So if the Sports Hall of Fame wants to grow its program, I think it's realized it's got to grow its program without the support of town funding. But there are certain aspects of the hall that need attention on an ongoing basis, regardless of the nuances or the growth or the uniqueness of a particular year, and that's what they're trying to capture for sustainable funding from the municipality. So it's the best I can explain it to you. We've had some of those discussions, some blue sky discussions about what we see this organization looking like, but all of those come down to, I think there's a base level of support that we need from the town in order to continue our operation, and then much beyond that, set us free.
Thank you. And it's not that I'm advocating. I was just curious to see what the long-term approach was. I certainly think that they've done, a fantastic job. And one of the benefits that you don't really realize until it goes into production is that the town of Aurora has generated some great exposure as a result of the Sports Hall of Fame. I know this year we were on the front page of I don't know if it's Toronto Star or the National Post with regards to Mike Palmetier being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the story was all about Aurora inducting him. And I think that that's a great little byproduct of this initiative, is that it continues to help raise our profile.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Thinking back to last year's budget, if I'm not mistaken, we funded Sport Hall of Fame not through I believe we funded it through a contingency fund or reserve fund as a one-year request. Can someone clarify the funding source from last year's
Mr.
budget?
Elliott or Mr. Gartner? Council contingency, perhaps?
We used either the interest from the hydro or the council contingency reserve fund, which is also one of the two hydro reserve funds.
Thank you.
I believe that was the source for it.
Thank you. And I recall the discussion on the table at budget last year was that the Hall of Fame had their petroleum funding had run out, and they were coming to us with a request for last year's, for 2017, and we decided to fund it as a one-year initiative out of the reserve fund, and I decided to bring that up because now it's coming out of the tax levy.
Thank you. Any other comments on the Sports Hall of Fame, please? Questions? Seeing none, if we could move on then to the Aurora Historical Society one-time storage request. Any comments, questions around that specifically? Councillor Thompson.
Through you to Mr. Elliott, just for, I guess, logistical reason, since it's a one-time request, why are we looking at it as an operating expenditure as opposed to, say, a capital one? Because next year we won't have this $5,000 pressure. So,
Through you, Mr. Chair, generally capital is over $10,000,
gotcha.
and so it landed in the operating domain. It's also still a little unknown. So, if one option might be to consider setting this off and referring it to the council operating contingency reserve or account in the event that they come back looking for $4,000 or $3,500 or even the full $5,000.
I like your thinking.
Because otherwise it's now building it into the base of the tax.
And I'd be comfortable with that approach.
Any other comments or questions on this particular item? All right, moving on then to item 5, the sponsorship program position, July to December 2018. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I emailed our CAO, and I got a response back from Mr. Downey as well on the current revenues from sponsorship and advertising. And I believe, I actually forgot it. It's about $168,000 combined. I think that's what this year or last year's budget was, revenue was?
Mr. Elliott, or sorry, Mr. Downey.
Sorry, I
microphone, please.
apologize. Last year's was less. I'm usually pretty good at remembering these numbers, but I've been looking at a lot lately.
I think it was 168,000 that you emailed me at.
I thought it was 148 last year.
Okay.
We're projecting 168
For this
within
year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, you know, part of the rationale for this increase is that it's going to be cost neutral. So will the position from the increase of 30,000 in position, will we see a kind of a marked increase or similar increase in advertising revenue for 2018?
Is that Mr. Downey?
Through you, we're going to work on that. I can't say that we will, so we're
Right.
not. So we're somewhat under promising and hoping to over deliver. So the budget doesn't reflect a huge increase. It does reflect some increase. What I can guarantee you is that we will be bringing in more money than we were paying out salary. But we right now are working at a return of about $5.2 for every dollar that we spend, and I certainly would like to stay somewhere within that target.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And my only comment would be that when I reviewed the numbers that were sent by staff, when I asked, and perhaps all members of council would probably like to see them. I think they went back 5 years, so I'm sure staff would forward them along. But I was actually quite impressed that the numbers were as high as they were in terms of sponsor. I think we can do better Mr. Downey, I think we can. My comment is that the numbers are quite good, but I think we can do better as well. And so I'm hoping that, if we do increase this salary position, that we'll at least get an increase of 30,000 in revenue. But I think with a little bit of elbow grease out there and, an increased emphasis on selling, that we can increase our revenues even more than that.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Any other questions, comments on this item? All right, then let us move on to item 6.1, the Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber Home Show. Request for $85,000 and that's waiver of fees, as I recall. Comments or questions on this? Councillor Gartner?
Thank you, and if I've missed this, I apologize. Do we have any idea what the home show brings into the chamber? And are they asking for this because they're not making ends meet?
Mr. Nader Rosny.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the number for their revenue, but the basic idea is that by waiving the fees that they would no longer require an admittance fee. So they're hoping to make more people, have more people come through the show by dropping the requirement for admission.
Councillor?
Thank you. I need to think about that one.
I'm sorry?
I need to think about that. So I would think a lot of people who are coming from Aurora will be coming from Aurora, so they won't be paying at the door, but they'll be paying in another way. So it's optics.
Councillor Tom?
Sorry, Doug, did you want to jump in there? So I'm not chairing the meeting. You were just about to press your microphone. Sure.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just noticed that, so the chamber also changed their submission on this one a bit, and I think it's a change because it's not my understanding, but after I said that they were dropping all admission fees, now the first line of this revised request, that I think it went from 78 or 72 to 85, but it says the chamber is requesting a sponsorship to drive attendance by offering 2-for-1 coupons. So now I'm not sure that it's all about free admission. Now I'm not, the way it was first brought forward was to waive the admission, but I think with the new executive director there, they might have had a change in approach on this one, so I withdraw that earlier comment.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Daw. So I have a question. This is a waiver of a fee, but can I be reminded again that do we actually waive the fee, or do we collect a fee but then give them, because I don't understand why we're it's essentially, we're waiving revenue, so I don't know why it's a tax pressure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the reason that this would be a tax pressure is because right now this revenue is counted on in the operating budget as something that happens every year and is booked, and right now they're committed to that revenue, so it would be in our budget. So this would, in effect, remove it from the budget. It's not paid and then taken out because we only do that in areas where the fee is required to be paid.
Right.
So something like a building permit, if council were to waive that, then you're actually giving a grant to pay the building permit because the council can't offer a no-charge building permit.
So the reason that's an option is it's an optional pressure, because if the home show decided to not run next year, we just wouldn't be discussing it as an option. It would just be a pressure on the budget. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and like Councillor Tom, we can't waive, we have to fund, is how I look at this. We can't waive anything. They're asking for funding for $8,500. And what our discussions were, we're going to get the money for this. What fund will we be using this out of?
Tax pressure.
It's tax pressure but I don't want to say I absolutely don't want to say we're waiving fees. I like to rather say that we're giving them a grant or something. And can't they apply for a grant? Through Mr. Mayor?
Well, we don't have grants that go up to that.
I know they're up to 5,000, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr.
Or is there a
Rosny,
call?
or-
I bet you Mr. Downey would know.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I suggest that if you're granting to waive a fee, it amounts to the same difference. I mean, basically, right now, we're counting on that rental of that space, and this would, in essence, allow us to take it out of the budget, but still provide the space to them, as per our booking policies now. So you need something that exempts you from the policy of charging for that space.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to think about that one as well.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, has the town ever waived these fees for the chamber, for the home show?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we used to. Quite some time ago, we used to waive the fees.
And through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey, how long ago was that?
They were over at the community center, and I will say they were waived until 2004 or so, maybe 2005.
And through you, Mr. Chair, is there any particular reason why we stopped waiving those fees?
The fees were waived at the request of the chamber.
Okay.
And they were imposed on them also at the request of the chamber.
Thank you. No, that's it for now. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
That's it.
Thank you. Just a quick question, I think probably for Mr. Nader Osney. So one of the goals is to increase their attendance. Has the chamber, and if this was talked about, I don't recall and I apologize, is the chamber in a position to show us what their past attendance were and whether or not they meet these goals, and what, if any, ramifications would come out of that? Is that even an appropriate request?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's quite a legitimate request of council to see what kind of information they'd be willing to provide. I'm sure they have that information. Again, this one has changed midstream because it was originally to offer it for free, and I think they've had some sort of change in heart. So now it's positioned more as a full-out sponsorship, a major sponsorship. So it's a little different. But I think we could probably ask the chamber to provide some more information. I'm sure they would.
So do we have any way of, so do they need they need the 8,500 to drive 2 for 1, because they only charge about $2, $5? Was it 4 or 5? 5? I'm sorry? I just don't remember. Yeah, so they'd have to drive a lot of additional sponsorship, a lot of additional attendees to cover that off. Okay, thank you. We'll go to item, which is now 6.2, which is the other items for the chamber, which combines the 3 items. Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none, we'll move to item 7. Councillor Gartner had a question on that. We'll go to 8 and then come back. Yeah, we'll go to 8, which is the powwow. Any comments or questions on that? I recall part of the discussion was sponsorship. That there was lots of sponsorship money available for this. Do I recall that correctly, or what? I'll go to the CAO first. Do you recall that conversation, or Mr. Downey? Was there initial discussion about sponsorship for this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this was funded entirely by the Aurora, by the 150 fund.
Yeah, the original one.
Right.
Yep.
The issue with regards to sponsorship, as you know, we're always looking for sponsorship opportunities. However, we need, if we're going to be moving forward with an event, we need to have a guaranteed funding source. and then we do our very best, if we can, to offset some of that. But we need a commitment of funds so that we can enter into contracts. With the powwow, half that 20,000 is to enter into a contract, and we would want to execute that sooner than later. If we could then offset that with sponsorship, we'll try, but if we're not successful, we need to know that we've got the funds.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Councillor Barkas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just trying to remember the conversation too. I know I didn't speak to it that day, but I think some of the conversation was also similar to some of the things that we said about the Christmas market, is that maybe there was this could be kind of rolled into some of the other events that we currently hold, the Multicultural Festival. I forget, there was another one. I think Councillor Humphreys brought it up that during that discussion, but I just remember that, and I don't know if that's something that we might want to look at as far as having what we did with the Christmas market, making conditional, and staff look at rolling it into some of the other events.
Thank you. But as I recall, and I don't know if you want to jump in, Mr. Downey, but I think with the discussion I might have had with Ms. Ware is that the powwow is considered a sacred ceremony. Am I correct on that, Mr. Downey? And therefore, they do not combine it. Could you comment on that, please?
Through you, Mayor, I couldn't have said it better. So this is not an event that is combined with another event. This is a standalone event.
And that wasn't said that night, but I appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions on that? Okay, could we please move back then to item 7? Councillor Gartner, you had a question on that? That was the sheet that was handed out this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the sheet that was handed out this evening was about the family leisure complex, but this one is about new projector and blinds for the ACC. Is that where we are? Well, so that's not really the one I wanted to ask the question about. But
That's for the AFLC, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt.
it is the same?
It's for the AFLC. It's for a new projector and blinds at the AFLC to outfit a room so that the rooms that we lost at the Magna Lebovic can be used by community groups at the AFLC.
Thank you. And the rationale behind it is for rental space. So if we're going to be renting out the space, are we going to be getting that amount of money or more in? Is there a business case for this $5,000?
Mr. Nader-Rosny?
To you, Mr. Mayor, so this is a remnant of the total package that results, the resulting impact on our budget as a result of giving up the Magna and Lebovic rooms. So at the end of the day, there's a net loss to the town in terms of revenue, because there's some programs we will not be able to do without those rooms. There are a number of ones that we can do, and this allows us to get some of that revenue that we would otherwise lose back by outfitting a room in the AFLC. So you'd have to see the entire sort of spreadsheet on it, but the bottom line is that we need a $5,000 projector to make that happen, and it wasn't allowed for in the budget.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, will whatever groups that were renting this at the library be willing to come to the leisure complex?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that we have, this would apply to groups that we know we can move to that room.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
I'm sorry, perhaps Mr. Nader-Rosny can explain to me again why this decision is before council? And why not staff for making the decision?
So originally the budget was cast, and there was an agreement with the library to come up with an adjustment to the town's budget after the Magna and Lebovic rooms, after we understood fully the impact of the Magna and Lebovic rooms moving to the sort of custody of the library, if you will. So we were already, we'd already cast the budget, we had done everything, and it was hoped that the library might have funded this. The library didn't see that it was possible for them to fund a capital item for the town, and so rather than make a big deal about it, we just dropped it, and we centered on the net adjustment from our two budgets. as a result of the rooms. And so this is sort of a hangover of that. Now we have this capital purchase that wasn't allowed for, it wasn't any capital list, and so we added it as a budget option. It is offset by the fact that the library has agreed to credit the budget, as you'll see in the numbers you have available, $18,700 basically, that is coming back into the budget, so that's getting added to the number you had to spend. So we're notionally saying that of the 18.7, we need 5 of it to buy this projector, and the 13.7 flows to council to spend on options.
Councillor?
I guess I struggle with this one because we have a $60 million budget, and essentially I'm being told that council needs to decide whether or not to buy a projector for $5,000 when directors have the discretion to do it on their own. And I guess I just would have thought that it could have just got figured out rather than spending the night debating whether or not we're going to have a projector for $5,000. So, okay, well, we'll debate it.
If that is it, no more comments or questions on any of those items. Would council like to take the break before we mark our forms or after? I'm sorry? Councillor Marcus, Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that request was put forward, and I actually would agree with it. I think it's important that all members of council rank this, and I think that they should all have the opportunity to rank it in the importance that they feel it should be, whether it should be added into as a tax pressure or not. So I would feel comfortable in whether it would be adding this. Doing this during the beginning of another meeting or something, or whether we have to come back at a separate time and have a whole separate other meeting to do it. I just think that all of us should be at this table making that decision.
Councillor Tom.
Well, if that's the case, we could be waiting a rather long wait because I will be having knee surgery in a week. Sorry. So unless we are having it done in the end of this week. I know Paul is probably out of town, I think, so I don't know if he's going to be back.
Councillor Perry's out of town tomorrow.
Until anyhow, I just think we have the schedule we have, and members can either make it or they can't, and it's unfortunate the other members of council can't be here to rank, but that's my opinion at this point anyhow.
Councillor Humphries?
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I was going to say. It's been said. Thanks.
Councillor Thompson?
Just before, if we are going to go rank it, I just wouldn't mind just getting some clarity about, how much all of this would put us over that 3.1% threshold.
Is that in the sheet, Mr. Elliott? You did that last year for us. Yeah, you should. Microphone, please, Dan.
Jason has just gone to actually print the voting ballot per se. I'm just looking for an email that I sent earlier. Council has available to it $128,600 towards these options if you're going to stay within the 3.1% threshold. The options price earlier in the evening was $220. We'll get the total value for you as Jason's getting this. As you're circulating it, I'll get you the number.
Councillor Thompson, the floor is still yours. Nope. Okay, thank you. Then my suggestion, let's get the sheets. We'll take our break. We can ponder and then come back. 10 minutes. No, we don't need to move recess. We just, okay? We're in recess.
May I have one, please? Mr. Mayor, the total cost of the options on the list, we have marked the Aurora Historical Society in the green bar in the middle as being referred to council contingency, so that's off the list. The total of the list that's there for you to rank is $240,400. 240,400, and you have available 128,600. If you approve the whole amount, it goes to 3.4% from 3.1. We will in the final voting. Right now, you're just prioritizing, and then then it'll come up in the next sheet we show you. After we prioritize them in order, we'll show that to you.
Okay, if I could ask everyone to take their seats, please. Mr. Elliott, Mr. Gartner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what we've done is we've totaled the scores on the left-hand side of the screen. We have then ranked them top score to low score. And so that column on the very left is the ranking, your rankings. And so as we follow those across, the sponsorship program option has 0 tax impact. It received the most points. The Christmas market received the second most points. And farthest to the right, that is the impact, that is the tax rate impact of the adjusted budget. The further down you go, you're adding more in. So the tax rate pressure goes up 3.2, 3.3, up to 3.4. So now we need to find the point at which that this is your preferred order of these items. It's now which ones do you wish to actually fund?
Okay, so I'm sorry, Councillor Humphrey. Just to be clear, Mr. Elliott, this is the total number. So the 2.1 plus the 1% for 3.1 building on top of the 3.1.
That's correct. So we started at 2.9. We had some pre-option considerations. We gave you some additional numbers. So we're at 2.8 before we start the ranking, and it will accelerate up to 3.4% tax rate pressure if you put all of these in.
Council, any quick questions? Comments? Mr. Elliott, your suggestion was?
You could try to find a motion of where people are comfortable cutting it off for funding on the presumption that it's every item above a line. So sort of draw a line through it, try to find a motion for that. But then last year we did find that there was an item further below the line that we wanted to bring up. So it might be just as efficient to vote for each item for inclusion in the budget, funded or not funded, and take 7 quick votes.
I'm sorry?
And take 7 quick votes down the list. That would be my suggestion.
Any quick first comments, Councillor Thompson?
I guess through you to Mr. Nadarozny, is there any opportunity to, I guess, go back and take a look at some of the initiatives that we have in our operating budget to see if there are any other options that council could consider, things that could be pushed to 2019 or, other avenues for funding some of these things so we can maintain our target level. Because I guess my other thought is then if we don't give staff an opportunity to come back and present some options to us, then it may fall upon some of us then to take a harder look at the budget and go make some, I guess, amendments or some recommendations on certain line items in the budget to cut. And I'd rather give staff an opportunity first to give us different approaches than to do it ourselves. So I don't know if Mr. Nadarozny would like to comment on that.
Mr. Nadarozny.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly if directed, we'd go back and provide some options on how to fund whatever line council draws with these options.
Appreciate it. I know a number of years ago when our former CAO was here, Mr. Garby, I know that was one of the things that council did at that time where they directed staff to go away, and then the following meeting or week he did come back with a number of different options in an effort to meet a specific number. So I'm just throwing that out as a process rather than going trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, in essence, if we're asking our CAO to go back and do that and for staff to do that, and we're still looking at that 3.1% number, I guess at the end of the day, what we're asking them to do is to go find room for $120,000. Because we're looking at 0.3% 2%. So I'm just kind of clarify what we would be asking staff to do. So.
Did you catch that?
And I don't know if does our CAO believe that there is possibly any room to look at for 120,000? Might be a tough answer to give us right now. I understand that.
Yeah, it is a tough answer.
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to say anything is impossible. It's a $50 million budget, and that seems like a relatively small amount. But as council is aware, we've already suggested a number of things that have been phased in over 2 years because we felt it was too much pressure to put on the organization to try and accommodate them. Things like the labor legislation, all in one shot. And as you will also remember, there's very little in here in new staff that aren't justified by a separate business case. So there's no, just new staff to deal with regular growth. So it'll be a tough exercise, but if that's what we're directed to do, we will do it.
Councillor Humphreys.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, I was same thing. So if there's any potential areas across the lines of business that can come up with something to help us out a little bit, because there's a few initiatives that I'd really like to see get there, but going and approaching up to the 3.2, 3.3 mark is, I'd hate to lose some of these things. I mean, if we have to make that choice, we will. But if there's anything else that can be done, I know that I greatly appreciate it.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. I have a question on the process. I mean, my recollection with what Councillor Thompson's referring to is that took place at the beginning of the budget process. This is taking place a week before or 2 weeks before the budget's supposed to be voted on. So I'm just wondering at what time would these changes come back? Will there be another budget meeting and we're going to review it then, or the changes will come back before the report to GC, or we have a pretty truncated timetable, so I'm just wondering when this would come back. That's my first question.
Mr. Nader Rosny.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd suggest you'd need at least one more budget meeting to deal with whatever recommendations staff have, and we would just have to adjust the schedule accordingly. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I just think, if we were thinking that we all knew what the budget asks were, so perhaps we could have asked for, if this was the intention of other members is to extend the process, we could have done that while others could have scheduled for it, because it is, a busy time of year for a lot of people, and, adding extra meetings this late in the game for something so fundamental to me just seems not something I would like to do. I think we should deal with it now. And the next thing I would just comment is, we're asking staff to tighten up. We already did, and they came in at 2.9 with their opening tax levy pressure, and that's through a lot of the work that the members of the FAC did, and good for them. And they've done a lot of great work throughout the year to really trim the budget where possible and save as much as possible. And yet, again, some of the items before us, and not to pick on Sport Aurora, but they're asking for a over $15,000 increase from their budget from last year. And so they're not coming in with any items below what, they're not asking for, we're not asking for reductions from them. And so that's just a comment.
Councillor Gartner, and then Councillor Thompson.
I just want to know, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan, to Mr. Elliott, between the 2.9 and the 3.1, like Sport Aurora crossed the line at 3.2, what would it have to come in at to be a 3.1? How much less would the ask have had to be?
Mr. Elliott.
Give us a moment.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you were trying to find the 3.1 balance point, the Sport Aurora, the Christmas market would be funded, and the Sport Aurora at 113 would need to drop to 99,100. I believe that's the question that you're asking?
Yes. That's
And then
exactly
you would be
the
at
question.
3.1.
So would anybody be willing to, I mean, I expressed some displeasure about some things that were done to stay at the 2.9 level, or to stay at 2.9 with respect to what was coming out of the reserve funds. And Councillor Thompson reminded me how important it was that we keep to our policy. So maybe the most logical way to do it would be to suggest to Sport Aurora that that's the amount of money that we can afford to spend. I'm just putting it out there.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
And I'm, I'm fine with the process if we want to vote on everything tonight. I'm just going back to other times we've been in this position. Other times we've added all of the organizations that we fund and put them on the board, and then there's been some conversation or decisions about, maybe reducing everybody's allocation by a certain percentage to help, help the process and make it more possible to fund everybody. I don't know, through you to Mr. Elliott, has council already approved the funding requests for the library, for the cultural center, for the historical society, and any other groups that we might, or is that still a possibility to put that on the board and then have some conversation about maybe sharing the wealth?
Mr. Elliott?
My understanding is that FAC received a report on the funding allocations proposed for the 2018 budget, but until the 2018 budget falls final approval, it's my understanding that nothing is final. So if you wanted to reopen those, technically they're available to be opened, as was anything that we discussed during the budget deliberations.
I remember there was one year, going back a few, that it was just a percentage across the board that was clawed back to help fund everything. So these are just approaches. I'm just throwing it out there to try and help the process, but it should be unfortunate that some of these things get left off. Given the scoring, it seems that people would tend to want to have them in.
If I could suggest, and Councillor Thompson, just building on Councillor Thompson's first suggestion, we'll go back, perhaps the FAC or perhaps or staff, could go back and talk with the groups and say, just come back and say, here's what the art of the possible is. And maybe do that over the next 2 weeks. Councillor Gartner?
You're speaking to Councillor Thompson's second suggestion about going back to the groups, not Mr. Nader-Rosny going back and relooking at the budget. Or maybe that wasn't your suggestion, Michael.
I'm sorry, Councillor Guy, I'm not sure.
Okay, so I can only speak from the cultural center's point of view. I mean, what was presented is so tight. I don't know how they'd have to go into their reserve fund. I'm not sure that's what we want to be asking a group. Anyway, so I'm not that what came out of FAC and was presented to council and passed by council in their minutes, I mean, that's been on the table for a long time. That's been the understanding of the group for a long time, even though it's not official till it's actually passed, but I'm not in favor of that.
Thank you, Councillor Gartner. But I don't get the sense at this point that there's any cohesiveness in our direction here at council as to how to move forward, and I think it does warrant that Mr. Nader-Rosny he's indicated that there's a possibility to look into that, to come back to us within a week, 2 weeks with some comments as to how we might make this work, and if we can't, we can't. But I think it's worthwhile having that second look to say, can we do this or can't? If someone would care to make that suggestion, then we can carry on with that and see what we may be able to accomplish. Or not. Councillor Kim?
Mr. Mayor, can we at least come out of here tonight agreeing to a demarcation line? And between now and a week or two from now, when staff come back to us and they don't come back with a viable solution, then at least we've made a decision here. A fallback. I think we need to at least come to some kind of decision as to where that line sits, and then have staff come back with some diverting some funds from somewhere else. But I don't want to not agree on something, and they're just going to come back and say, you know, we found an additional 150,000. Then we got to figure out where that line is again.
Well, I think in Councillor Gartner, I'll go to you in just a sec. I think in fairness to principles we've already established, the number is 3.1. If that's the goal for this evening, I think we have to stick with what we've already established. That would be my concept. Councillor Gartner?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, thank you.
It's established.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I agree, and I mean, we knew that coming into this meeting that if, you know, upon approval of the various asks, it was going to be above 3.1 increase if all were approved. So, I mean, if the start of tonight we asked ourselves that question, maybe we could have not had tonight's meeting and just pushed it off until staff could come back with a number. So, to me, I think we vote on each item and for inclusion in the budget. And seems like the easiest way forward to me, but you know, if council decides to push it off to a further meeting for more info, then that's the will of council.
It's the will of council then that we vote on each individual item? Looks like. Then I'm going to call for, and I would prefer 7 quick votes as opposed to 7 really long ones. Someone put item 1 on the floor then. Sponsors, no, that's a no. Oops. We can't have both up there, can we? Just leave the chart up, okay, Rashida? And, because it's all hand vote anyways. So the first item then would be Christmas market. Someone put that on the floor, please. I'm sorry? Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Maracus. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Sporterwar. So put that on the floor, please. Councillor Kim. Yeah.
Was that a 4-2 or a 3-3? 4-3? Okay, thanks. I guess we have 7 here.
Sporterwar. Councillor Humphrey, Councillor Kim. Correct? Councillor Humphreys, you had your hand up? Thank you. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? That carries. Innovation Fair. All in favor? I'm sorry. Thank you. Mover and a seconder, please, on the Innovation Fair. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Kim. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Sport Hall of Fame Sustainability. All in favor? Oh, Councillor Humphries, you moving that? Is there a second, please? Councillor Maracas, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. The new projector and blinds for the AFLC. Someone move that, please. Councillor Gartner, thank you. Second. No second? Okay, Councillor Tom is seconding it. All in favor, please. Opposed? That fails. Powwow. Mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Gartner. Is there a second? There's no second. No vote. Pardon me? Well, it's not included. Chamber of Commerce other at $7,500. Those in favor? Pardon me, a mover and a seconder. Neither, there's no one moving that, not included. Chamber of Commerce Home Show. Mover and a seconder, please. Seeing none, that does not carry. And the one-time storage charge does not require. Mr. Elliott, can you give us a quick update, please? Councillor Thompson?
My apologies, Mayor Don and the members of council, but I have to head out, and so I will follow up and see what where we settled on.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that leaves us $70,800 past the 3.1% mark. So we're just above 3.1.
Councillor Kim has to leave as 1, 2, 3, 4. No one else can leave. Can you give us the exact number, then, please, sir?
The exact number of which? The percentage increase?
I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Gartner.
We're at 3.26.
Thank you. Councillor Gartner?
It pained me to vote against Sport Aurora because of the work that they do. Can we not, I mean, we're no further ahead now. Can we not, I can't remember what Mr. Elliott said, but I think we're about $14,000 or $15,000 lower than their ask. Can we not speak to them and see if they can work with that for this year, perhaps, so that we could come in at 2.1? Or is there? I mean, it just seems to me we could come in at 2.1 minus $13,000 or $14,000 with the Sport Aurora ask. Is there? I don't know. Is there any way that we could work with them on this, or perhaps at some point, if we get more revenue from the sponsorship money, or from, you know, renting this room with the projector, that we can top them up?
We don't have a projector in the room to rent.
I mean, because when we had the original list, it was the Sport Aurora that was the divide there. I mean, we're just kind of playing around here with all of this stuff. But we did have an official process where we ranked everything. And we would have come in at 2.1 except for, so I said $14,000 or $15,000. If we'd taken that off Sport Aurora's budget, we would have come in at the 2.1. And 3.1. And we do have some things on this budget that are looking like they could bring us in some extra money that we're not accounting for, in particular the sponsorship. So I just throw that out there. Because we did go through the ranking thing, and it should stand. We should figure out how to make that work.
Okay, my suggestion is that we direct staff to see what they can do, and to come into the number that we've all agreed on through the budget principles, which is 3.1, knowing where we want to go. Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Dan, you mentioned 77,800.
We're 7,800. 7,800. And so perhaps the motion is to refer the budget back to staff to find options to fund the $70,800 difference. And I appreciate the fact that council has examined the list of options and have taken some things off the list, and that'll make staff's job a little easier, knowing that what you want in, what you want out, and now we'll go and try to find the other $70,000 for you.
Okay. So the motion, Mr. Clerk?
That staff be directed to come up with $70,800 for the 2000 operating budget before it is passed, or something along those lines.
Someone care to put that on the floor? Councillor Maracas, is there a second? Councillor Humphreys? Comments or questions? All in favor? Whoop, Councillor Gartner?
And I need to be clear about this. This is not with respect to the ranking. This is with what we just did now about voting on each one. So why would we bother to go through this whole ranking process? We have a process. That's what we should be looking at, how we can come within the 3.1 using our ranking process, not because we've decided something ad hoc at the last minute. It's just craziness, sorry. We've been to a very good budget process to date, and what's just happened here is just not acceptable to me.
I wouldn't say it's craziness, Councillor.
Well, it's not acceptable.
Frustration.
But we have.
Mr. Nader-Rosny.
See, Mr. Mayor, to that point, I just want to remind council the ranking is a tool, so it wasn't designed to be a hard stop. Okay. It was designed to be a tool to feed the actual discussion that you've had. So it was always anticipated that there would be some things, well, it was always thought that there could be three sort of categories that came from the ranking. Things that clearly you want to do with a high score and they fit in the budget, so those are the real easy ones. You want to do them and they fit, boom, they're done. Then in other situations you'd have some that don't even get enough points, that there's not even enough interest. Even if you had the money, there just wasn't enough interest in funding it, so those drop off the list. And the challenge is the ones in the middle, the ones that have enough points or enough interest from council that there's a consensus amongst council that they want to move the item forward, but there isn't enough money there to stay within the range or the goal that council has. And so the discussion you had is exactly what that exercise is supposed to generate, and then there's a couple of ways to handle that. You either carve out a few of those things and don't do them, or you go back to staff and say find the money because we're absolutely doing them, or you negotiate with those amongst those items and try to chisel some of them down so they all fit. So I think at this point we've got the direction. You've cut a few of those things off the list. You've said you don't want those. There's clearly you want something of significance to Sport Aurora, and you're stressing over the fact that you want to do those other things, but you want to also hold to the 3.1. So I think we'll take that direction back as staff, and we'll endeavor to bring you back something to, or one or two options to consider to meet all the objectives that you have.
Thank you. That does clarify it. And with respect to Sport Aurora and the sport plan, I mean, we need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Motion's on the floor. All in favor of the motion on the floor, please. To direct staff to go back. Yeah. Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. I think we're done for tonight, so adjournment, please. Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Humphreys? Yes. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, staff.